an academic by training. I started out in just pure math, and I made the move to data science, where I work on complex data sets, machine learning, and cool stuff like that involving big data. What I'm here today to talk to you about, however, is one of my pet projects, which is cryptography. And in particular, the rather significant changes which have happened in the last couple of years regarding password strength, and my concern as a sort of enthusiast that no one seems to really be taking note of this. So in particular, what I want to talk to you about today are something called hash functions, which you probably don't think have much to do with your day-to-day life, and some of you may know what they are or may have heard the term MD5, but may not know much more than that. But I want to convince you that these things are actually very relevant to everything you're doing with your phone every single day, as well as every web app you go to, and so on and so forth. So, a hash function is just a function that takes some input, scrambles it, and produces a fixed width output. And in particular, it does it in a way that even if I make small changes to the input, that can produce totally different outputs, and that there shouldn't be any way of guessing the input from the output. So I shouldn't be able to go backwards. And so, for example, these are some hashes of using a real algorithm, SHA-1. And so notice how just the difference between capital password and lowercase password produces a totally different result. And whether my passwords are simple passwords or whether they're actually strong passwords, the type that we all wish that our friends would use but they never do, it still hashes into something which is about the same. So why do hash functions matter to you? And what's this have to do with what's changed? Well, they're used in data integrity all the time, but this is actually arguably their least interesting role. So anytime you use Bitcoin, it's entirely hash function based. And you could actually do a fun talk just on the mathematics of Bitcoin. It's a very ingenious system. Look it up sometime if you want a fun read. But what I'm here to tell you about today is password authentication, and how password authentication is really not a very good way of having users prove that they are who they say they are. We use it because it's what we know, and it's what's been done forever, and it's what's built into the frameworks that we're familiar with, like Ruby and Django, but it's not necessarily a very good way to do it. So, just a brief recap, how does password authentication work? We use this all the time, but we don't really think about what's going on behind the scenes. So, you enter your password as some type of plain text, you send it to the server. The server then computes the hash of it. This is this one-way scramble function that we're talking about. The server then compares it to a list of hashes for different users that they have on file. So in particular on Linux, it would be the etc shadow file. And then if it's the same hash, then we say, okay, you are who you say you are, and if it's not, then you must have entered the wrong password. Now, why do we do it this way? Well, we do it this way because people can get at your master list of hashed passwords. It shouldn't happen. We would like it not to happen. Obviously, you're trying to guard this securely, but it can happen. Any type of security flaw or malaise which can plague your web app can potentially compromise the list of password hashes. So, you should never design your system assuming that this list is secret. You should never assume that someone can't know this. The list of companies that have had large breaches of passwords where this entire table has gotten stolen, used for illicit purposes, and then later even appeared in the public domain where you can now run tests against it is huge. So how would we go about trying, if I have a copy of this table, I can now, I'm not limited by the 3 login rule, the 10 login rule, or anything like this. I can try lots and lots of attempts if I want to find out your login information. So we can do complex arcane mathematics and try to reverse engineer this scrambling function, but there's a far easier way, and that's we just guess. And we guess and we check, and we guess and we check. So if I know that Laura's hash is this long mess over here, D8, blah, 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 and I know that Laura likes cats, then I could start taking common passwords I think she might have, and I can try computing their hash. So I get down to kitten42, and okay, that's it. Now I can log in as Laura, send to that, and it will authenticate me as if I'm her. So these are not hypothetical things that people just talk about on use groups. These are real tools. John the Ripper is a password cracking tool which goes back a long ways, and there's new ones which are particularly relevant in today's world. Hashcat, and in particular OCL Hashcat, is a very powerful tool. One of the things which has changed in particular is that instead of trying to intelligently guess passwords, such as here I'm using a word list, we've actually gotten so good at trying to do attempts that you can actually just brute force now within some sane limit. So in computer science, we talk about problems which are embarrassingly parallelizable. These are things that you throw more resources at it and you get better results. Double the computers, double the attempts. This scales perfectly. It's one of the only things which actually really does in the real world. So to give you just a sense of order of magnitude of how many guesses we're talking here, your CPU on average can do maybe 10 million hashes per second. This is pretty good, but what do we know which has a bajillion cores, each of which can do simple operations in parallel, and it's made by either NVIDIA or ATI, right? So a GPU has become the tool of choice if you want to try to crack passwords now. And the speed which we're looking at here, we're looking at here about 3 orders of magnitude more attempts with one GPU than with your processor. And this is with potentially a fairly ordinary graphics card. And so here's something which, if it doesn't scare you, then it really ought to. So people have built clusters of servers using high-end GPUs, and they can now, not just using word lists and rules, but they can actually brute force lists all passwords within a given length. So this is the NT hashing algorithm, NTLM. So the other thing which has changed in the last couple years, which is different than it would have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, has been, of course, the rise of the cloud. And in particular, not only can you get machines off of Amazon with EC2, you can also get machines which are GPU computing enabled. And they even have some nice, okay, almost there. They even have some nice distributed tools for that. So you can, instead of using 100 hours on one GPU, I can go out and I can get 100 machines for 1 hour, and this is actually going to work just as well. And I wish I had thought of this first. There are businesses like Cloudcracker which will do this for under 20 bucks, and it's amazing how much you can get for $17 and change. There's 2 solutions to this problem potentially. And the first one, which is not a very good solution in my personal opinion, is that I can run this hash function, this scrambling thing, over and over again. You could see the problem as it's too easy to do this scrambling operation. I can do too many attempts too quickly, and therefore it's vulnerable to people brute forcing it. So if I just make it harder and basically stab myself in the foot trying to miss any of the major bones, then I can make it harder for an attacker. And this is not necessarily such a bad idea. So I take the hash of the hash of the hash however many times I want. And this is actually what Apple does for their GMG file encryption. They take 250,000 times over and over again. It's enough that it doesn't slow you down when you're trying to decrypt your encrypted disk image, but it's something that if you're trying to actually hack someone else's, that's a significant impediment. What I want you to take away from this talk today, though, is that I think that there's a better way, and that's do away with passwords, because the rate at which computing power is growing between the cloud, between GPU computing, and between potentially botnets, if you're on the slightly less ethical end of the scale, is incredible. And instead of just trying to burden your own servers, do away with the single point of failure. There are lots of good systems using 2-factor authentication, biometrics, and other technologies which are still emerging for proving that people are who they say they are. They don't have a single one document or one password or one bit string which would compromise the whole system. All of these things are hard, and the best way to deal with it is to make it someone else's problem. So I would suggest seriously considering, if you're a web developer, and I'm guessing that just a couple of you are, looking into using one of the open authentication frameworks, either OpenID, Facebook ID. I've seen a growing number of sites that are using this, and these big tech companies have teams of people whose full-time job it is to deal with difficult authentication questions. You shouldn't have to try to reinvent some type of complicated scheme where you text people and they enter the face of the moon, so on and so forth. So don't trust passwords. Try to use multiple forms of authentication, and be aware that even if you make people choose really strong passwords with lots of symbols in uppercase and lowercase, it's going to be guessable either now or in the very near future. Thank you.